Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for our information session on the Institute for Innovation in Prosecution's latest initiative on prosecutor well-being. My name is Michelle Mason, and I'm a Policy and Operations Associate at the IIP. Before we jump into today's discussion, I want to mention that the IIP will be hosting a panel discussion on law school, racial justice, and prosecution next Wednesday. You can follow the link in the chat to register. Additionally, this evening, at 7 p.m., our policy director, Alyssa Haydari, will be hosting a screening and discussion for the new series, Philly DA. The link is also in the chat, and we hope to see you there. I would also like to take this moment to read the IIP's Land Acknowledgement Statement, honoring the land and culture of Indigenous peoples. We want to acknowledge that the IIP is based in New York City, which is Lenape-Hoking, the Lenape homeland. We honor all of the Indigenous nations and their land with great gratitude and acknowledge the genocide and continuous displacement of Indigenous peoples. We also acknowledge the enslaved Africans whose labor built Manhattan during the colonial era and beyond. We acknowledge the harm inflicted upon the Indigenous communities and people of color across the country, which inspires our ongoing work. Again, I want to thank you all for joining today's information session on our Prosecutor Well-Being Initiative. Last month, the IIP released our training presentation for line prosecutors and an implementation guide for electeds and supervisory staff. I've had the pleasure of working with today's presenters over the past year to develop this training guide. The Prosecutor Well-Being Initiative is a continuation of our trauma-informed prosecution training that was released last summer. After the unprecedented turn of events that we have all been facing with the COVID pandemic and the rise in social unrest, prosecutors have been put in a particularly complex and stressful position. Altered working conditions, unpredictable operational changes, an unrelenting backlog of cases, and an inflection point in the fields of criminal justice reform has made the underlying stressors and trauma prosecutors face undeniable. The IIP has worked closely with offices across the country this past year, and all of them have emphasized the need for prosecutor well-being. The purpose of this initiative is to begin the conversation amongst prosecutors about the weight of their work and how they can take better care of themselves to have healthy and fulfilling careers. We also provide offices with the foundation to begin investing in their staff's well-being by making sustainable changes to their organizational structures. I am happy to introduce the co-creators of this training and implementation guide, Rena Paul and Alison Trenk. Rena is a former federal and state prosecutor who is the founding partner of Alka Law LLP, a law firm that takes a humanistic approach to law and serves corporations, educational institutions, and individuals. Rena worked at the Manhattan DA's office and in the Eastern District of New York as an AUSA. She has extensive experience handling cases involving trauma, including sex crimes, crimes against children, domestic violence, and violent crimes. Allison is a licensed clinical social worker in private practice in New York. She has previously been employed by district attorneys' offices and criminal justice reform agencies in order to provide clinical expertise and program management for people who are engaging in the criminal justice system, including survivors of violence and people accused of crimes. I'm happy to turn it over to the two of them.
Thank you, Michelle. And while Michelle is loading our PowerPoint, to begin, this will happen once our PowerPoint is there. We're almost there. And now I need to just do my VML. Okay, so welcome to our PowerPoint. To begin, we offer the following disclaimer in our workshops, and we will reiterate it today. We will be talking about well-being in the prosecution work environment. However, our discussion is not mental health treatment. Please seek out professional help from a mental health practitioner if you are experiencing any distressing thoughts, feelings, or symptoms. Also, we will be speaking about trauma, and therefore at any point, if you feel triggered, please take care of yourself. While we are not giving the full presentation today, the following are objectives that we target in the full version of our well-being presentation. We suggest that tending to prosecutor well-being is the most accessible criminal justice reform that you can individually implement today. We define well-being as it relates to prosecutors. discuss the connection between well-being and ethics for prosecutors, and demonstrate that attention to prosecutor well-being is critical to support fair case adjudication and reduce attrition. We then identify the signs and consequences of not investing in well-being. Finally, we define 6 areas of well-being in detail and provide a practical guidance to support each of those 6 categories. I'll hand it off to Rena now.
Hi, everyone. So in 2016, the American Bar Association began to pay attention to lawyer well-being in earnest, and the discussion of lawyer well-being is evolving. In 2016, a study by the ABA and the Hazelton Betty Ford Foundation found that lawyers have higher rates of problematic drinking and mental health issues than the general population. You can see some statistics on the slide. Between 21 and 36% qualify as problematic drinkers, the study found. 28% struggle with depression, 19% with anxiety, 23% with stress, that seems low, 11.5% reported suicidal thoughts during their career. The study found that the highest rates of problematic drinking and depression were found in younger lawyers, which they defined as those within their first 10 years of practice, and lawyers working in firms. The ABA study said that the attorneys in the first 10 years of their practice are more susceptible. We all know that prosecutors tend to begin their career within the first 10 years of their practice. And while it is not a law firm culture, many of the parts of the culture of the prosecutor's office are similar to that of firms. Drinking is a major part of the social culture. The casework is intense. And while prosecutors are not billing hours, they are working incredibly long hours and weekends, bleeding into their social life. Prosecutors' offices also have their own unique challenges, which include their decisions have an impact on others. People are incarcerated based on their decisions, and their decisions are of great impact. Working within the inherent inequities in the system is an issue that all prosecutors face. Prosecutors are under-resourced, dealing with many, many cases, and often given a lot of responsibility and autonomy with relatively little experience, which is a wonderful thing for professional growth, but can be very stressful. We also know that prosecutors deal intensely with cases involving trauma, which Alison will define for you in a moment. We talk about well-being in our training. So what is well-being? That is a term that we've all heard used in many ways. We define it as a multidimensional concept, defined not as the absence of illness, but rather a positive state of health. So taking care of one's well-being is a preventative effort. It's a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach, which was so often what the support systems for lawyers were built around, reactive rather than proactive. The ABA defines well-being as a continuous process whereby lawyers seek to thrive in each of the following areas: emotional health, occupational pursuits, creative or intellectual endeavors, sense of spirituality or greater purpose in life, physical health, and social connections with others.
In the presentation, we discuss stress, working in stressful environments, and working with trauma. So when discussing trauma, we use the following definition. Individual trauma results from an event, series of event, or set of circumstances experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening with lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and mental, physical, social, emotional, or spiritual well-being. I like to use an example when I worked in one of the special victims units of a DA's office here in New York. A direct experience of trauma is like when you're driving down the highway of life, maybe feeling good, thinking about your day, maybe enjoying some music, and suddenly you're sideswiped by another vehicle out of nowhere. You recoup from the incident in whatever way that you can. When you re-enter your car to drive, now you have number one, you have the memories of a scary experience stored in your brain, and number two, the knowledge that you're vulnerable going forward. The brain's response after the trauma then becomes a protective mechanism. We learn about a threat that exists in the world, and then our body and brain want to adapt to avoid that danger in the future. Prosecutors are exposed to this definition of trauma every day. They're doing incredible work seeking justice and helping people stay safe. While their life may not be directly threatened every day, they're listening to circumstances experienced by individuals as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening as part of the work. They're bearing witness to these harmful situations that humans endure every day. So next, the following are examples of places prosecutors encounter trauma or the content of trauma. It is a lot of text, but we want you to see the diversity of areas that prosecutors engage with trauma on a daily basis. Some examples include interacting with crime survivors and witnesses, interacting with family members of the deceased, getting threatened, death threats by family, like families of victims or families of the accused, media attention to work, inherent inequality in the system, lack of ability to do anything about it from an individual perspective, and having something happen to a victim that you said that you would protect. In the presentation that we give, we go into detail describing those 5 significant consequences of working with stress and trauma. They are as follows, and then there's a big list. It's burnout, compassion fatigue, secondary traumatic stress, vicarious trauma, and PTSD, otherwise known as post-traumatic stress disorder. We go through the list and we distinguish one from another. We note that it is not important to memorize the difference of each of these items, just to recognize that there are different ways that our bodies and minds respond to working with stress and trauma, and that all are preventable and treatable, just as long as you know what's going on. If you're aware, then you're able to do something about it. So you may be thinking, yeah, Alison, prosecutors deal with trauma daily, but why should they care about wellness? Within each of these 6 petals on the graphic that you see, ones that Rena referred to, are areas of wellness. They are as follows. Again, physical health, emotional health, community and social connections, creative and intellectual endeavors, spirituality, and occupational pursuits. We think of each section as an area to routinely evaluate and strengthen for wellness. When we give the presentation, we ask the audience to consider each section that we discuss as it relates to their life and then jot down some ideas. We review each category in detail, describe its importance, and provide suggestions of what one can do to attend to that area of wellness. We normalize the idea that you do not need to be perfect at wellness, but you do need to be mindful of each of these areas and give them some attention. The goal is to routinely and intentionally engage with the practice of doing small acts of each area to strengthen that wellness category. In doing so, one creates a life of balance. This mitigates the damage of routinely working with traumatic content and, in fact, helps one perform better in work. So wellness is not a state of being, but a state of action. There is no magic bullet approach to well-being, no pill to take. The process is holistic, ongoing, and different for everyone. Throughout the presentation, we encourage the audience to remove their self-judgment and remember that most people struggle with tending to all of these areas, but every small act makes a difference in your quality of life.
So we knew this was going to be a critical training for prosecutors when we put it together. We have been overwhelmed with the response that we are getting from offices across the country, and we are thrilled that leaders of offices are looking at wellness of their employees and thinking about ways to bring solutions, because people are looking for solutions. We are bringing these trainings to offices across the country. Our goal is to open a conversation and between the two of us have a safe place for the beginnings of that conversation in each office that we talk to. So by bringing the perspective that I have working in the offices that I worked with Alison, also working in the system, but having the additional lens of a mental health professional, we hope that it will create a container to have these conversations. And we urge you to review the implementation guide that is part of what was released by the IIP. It looks at ways that offices can implement wellness solutions. It includes education, buy-in from leaders, normalizing conversations around wellness and trauma in your offices, and looking at different models across the country of people that are doing interesting things in this area. We talk about Maricopa County as one example, who has a peer support program that is very successful in their office. And we encourage you to just check that out for more information. We want to thank Michelle so much for bringing us together, and the IIP for its continued work in the field. We are happy to take questions from the audience. And if you don't want to ask us questions now, our contact information is there. So you can feel free to reach out to one or both of us or to Michelle and the IIP for more information about trainings or to find, if you can't find it online, how to find our resource guide.
Somebody asked how much the training costs and how we set up the planning session.
So the way that we assess the cost in the session is what an office wants to do. So we have a conversation with each office before to see what they're looking for, because our goal is really to make this specialized and customized for each office, depending on their needs, the amount of people that we'll be speaking to, and the format.
And how do we bring the training to this? How do we bring this training to our offices? You can obviously contact us in those emails or get in contact through the IIP.
Yeah, so you can reach out to us and we can set up the conversation. We'll have a quick call, not a quick or not so quick call with you, depending on what you need, and talk about what you're thinking and what you want to bring to your staff.
How to address climate issues with senior leadership within leadership and post-training change.
Climate issues with senior leadership, I suppose you mean, can you be more specific about what you mean so we can try to answer it better?
Like the culture of the office?
Sure.
The culture. Okay, we're gonna go with culture. So the culture of senior leadership within leadership and post-training change. So I guess implementation, which absolutely great question. Again, Rena, you can address this too, but it's really, we're meeting with offices to decide what they want to do with, how they want to address this going forward. Some offices, it's just a training session to get the conversation started. Some want to do some, big, large scale culture change.
There's been a clarification, which is helpful. So old school thinking and when the office has reached a progressive ceiling. Okay, so if in dealing with individuals within the office who have differing levels of belief about what should happen, I suppose, going forward is what we're getting at. And we can discuss that. I think it's a pretty fact specific and office specific question about how you're approaching culture change in your office moving forward. In this area in particular, what have you done? What are you doing? Is this the first kind of an initiative you're bringing to your office, or are you well along on the path? So that's the kind of conversation we can have with you one-on-one to address whatever issues you feel are happening in your office.
Another question is, do other law enforcement agencies or other agencies that have workers who experience secondhand trauma, do they do similar trainings, or is this groundbreaking? And then clarification, my point is, do trainings like this exist elsewhere, but it's just never been done with prosecutors?
So, I don't think this has been done with prosecutors. Certainly the three of us did a lot of work to try to find out what was going on in the field and look across the country. What we found most interesting was that while there were studies about the impact of trauma on judges, for example, there were no studies on prosecutors. So no one has done a survey or to try to figure out, and that is what we're moving to work on to try to actually gather some more data from prosecutors. Certainly we're gathering it from speaking with you all, and whoever of us has reached out, whoever of you all have reached out to us. We're definitely anecdotally gathering a lot of evidence, and we're seeing over and over that there's a huge need. And really it's been a very overwhelming response, which tells us that there's not much out there and that this is needed. And to answer your question about other fields, we certainly know of at least one that it's being done with police officers. There's a person named Joe Samaro, who you can watch about him in a documentary on HBO called Crisis Cops. Am I right, Michelle?
Ernie and Joe, Crisis Cops.
It's a really good documentary, and he's awesome. He's doing work around positive communication with police officers. So similar, and I think he's also doing wellness work with police officers. So he's great. Check him out too, if you're working with law enforcement officers, which you all are, I assume.
And I'll drop a link to a panel that we hosted with him. And then another question was, can you speak more about the Maricopa County model, and why is it considered a model?
Yeah, you want to do that one, Michelle?
Yeah, sure. So the Maricopa County, they developed their own peer support program, which is where they train their staff. It's actually open to all staff, including paralegals, and actually, I think just anyone in the office can interview to be a peer support 24, I believe it's like 24/7, but they have shifts on who is on call, and they have a phone and an email where at any point, any of the staff members can reach out and speak to anyone at any point of the day. And it's kind of, they were able to infuse it into their culture in a way where supervisors completely understand if you are going to step away from your work because you have to be on a call. And they also are thoroughly trained enough to also know when to say, okay, we need to get you additional help. But it's worked really well for their offices. And I believe that they are in conversation with other people to try to replicate it.
So we have Kirsten, thank you for your comment that the NDAA has been doing well-being training. We did not know they were doing training. We certainly were aware that they're doing awesome things in the space of well-being, sort of concomitantly with us releasing this. They also have released, have an initiative that we have looked into, but it's good to know they're doing trainings too.
I think that's about it, unless you have anything else to close out, Alison or Rena.
Well, we want to thank you again, Michelle, and the IAP. This has really been, coming from doing this work into being able to look at it with a kind of divorced from being inside of the work and look at it with the help of Alison and Michelle, and to really spend as much time as we did deep diving on the subject to try to really continue to serve prosecutors and the community after leaving the job has really been an honor and a privilege. So I appreciate it. And I hope that we will speak to as many of you as possible. We really want to reach everybody that we can with the training.
I second that, and thank you so much. And obviously it's, we really want to be able to, being that we've worked in prosecutors' offices, our friends are there in prosecutors' offices, we've seen and witnessed people really wanting to do great work and also suffering too in their own individual ways. And the hope was to be able to get conversations started, and also to give individual, so people can walk away with this training with tools in their toolbox to be able to help themselves immediately. And being able to really sort of look at the job and ways of take care of themselves within the job. So yeah, it's an honor to do this work, and thank you. Thanks for attending today and being interested.
I would just like to say that I noticed that DA Paps from Missoula County, which is referenced in the implementation guide, is the one. She's doing really great work with NDAA right now on this issue. And I encourage you all to check it out, and if you can, reach out to her and learn more about the programs that her office has been using. But thank you again to Rena and Alison for the amazing time and work that you put into this initiative. The IEP is grateful to have you as our partners. And I'd also like to give a special thank you to our creative associate, Shauna, for the amazing work that she did in bringing our materials to life, as well as the support that we've gotten from the rest of the IEP team. I added some additional contact information to the chat if you'd like to follow up with us for more information about Prosecutor Well-Being and our other initiatives. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.